Oh,
We're good now.
oops.
It's Zach Eady with Purdue Men's Basketball, and you're watching Boilers in the Stands.
Welcome back to Boilers in the Stands. I am your host, Joe Jackson. Joining me, as always, is Kraig Bowers as we are on episode 3 of our Purdue freshman kind of breakdown preview series that we're doing this summer. We'll be talking about Jack Bherner today from Brownstown, Indiana. Kraig, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. For any of you guys that heard and then where we're good now as the show started, we were having some technical difficulties, some error messages coming out of StreamYard, and then it finally went live while we were still talking.
And I did not realize that it was live.
That's okay. Apologies for that. I'm doing good. I'm a little red in the face still, Joe. I started running again for the first time in like 20 some years 3 days ago, and had to get my run in quick before the show.
There you go.
Gonna give myself a little bit more recovery time in the future so that my face isn't bright red when we start the show.
Yeah, it gets the blood flowing for the show, though. So we're happy to be back. Like I said, we'll be talking about Jack Bherner today. The one thing I wanted to kind of surprise ask you about first is Purdue's non-con officially announced for this season. We don't have to go crazy in depth, but anything, I know the games have kind of been announced throughout the past couple of months, but anything kind of stand out to you about the non-conference? Anything you like, don't like, things like that?
I mean, I think just, again, that it's another really competitive schedule, and it's on track to be one of the more competitive schedules that anybody's going to have out there in the country, really, depending on maybe how a couple of those teams shape up once the season really gets rolling. But, I mean, just looking at it, you're getting Alabama, you're getting Marquette, you're getting Auburn. All three of those right now are pretty highly ranked going into the season, I guess, on like KenPom and some of those places like that, some of the metric sites. And then you're obviously in San Diego, potentially have a couple of good games there. So it's nothing like last season. I don't know that we'll see something like last season again from anybody for a while, because that Maui Invitational was just so absolutely stacked from top to bottom. So, but really good. I'm looking forward to a bunch of them. I love that he's scheduling SEC teams that tend to be athletic and disruptive, not necessarily always the most disciplined, but super athletic and disruptive teams out of that conference a lot of times. And those are the teams that tend to give Purdue trouble. So I love that he's scheduling those early on in the season and letting them go to battle against them.
Yeah, and I agree with a lot of that. Like, I can briefly run through it. So opening day, Texas A&M Corpus Christi, then Northern Kentucky, Yale, which will be it's a bye game, but that's a very good bye game right there. Home against Alabama, at Marquette, home against Marshall. Then you got the Rady Children Invitational in San Diego, which will be 2 games of BYU, NC State, Ole Miss, 2 of those 3. The Indy Classic against Texas A&M in Birmingham, Alabama for Auburn, which is probably one of the games I'm more excited for. And then Toledo, that is the non-con. The thing I like the most, because I think it's hard to say like there was a flaw with last season's non-con because of just how insane it was, but there was no true road games ever. There was no true road game at all in last season's non-conference schedule. You get at Marquette, and even if Marquette's a little bit down, that's still going to be a good environment. And then the Auburn at Auburn, or is it one of those that's like how the Indy? I think it's like how the Indy Classic is like neutral for Purdue, right? I believe.
Yeah.
So either way,
I believe that's right. I figured out what the error was, Joe.
What? Oh,
it was not wanting to connect to the Boilers in the Stands Twitter, and apparently there was a upgrade made that requires a premium subscription to a Twitter account to go live. So it looks like we're going to have to talk to Greg after this is over.
Yeah. So we'll get into the Jack Bherner now. Just wanted to briefly talk about the Purdue non-conference schedule. We also have some things to figure out, I guess, on the back end after this show. But Jack Bherner, 6'5", 210-pound wing from Brownstown Central, was ranked number 301 by 247 Sports Composite. 25.6 points, 7.3 rebounds, 5.2 assists, and shot 44% from three last year, as he led Brownstown Central to, I believe, their first state title in school history of like any sports, I believe. Have some family that grew up around there, so that's kind of why I knew that. Did play for Grand Park Premier. Believe he was played for his dad, who coached that during AAU. So as we've kind of done with all of the players that we've done so far, which if anybody has missed, we have gone over CJ Cox and Daniel Jacobson already, so you can definitely tune into that after finishing up this one. But Kraig, what are kind of your initial thoughts on Bherner?
Well, before I give the Bherner thoughts, I want to give a quick shout out to Dakota Mathias, Purdue legend. 15 points in 14 minutes the other night in Summer League. I know a lot of Purdue fans have been following along with Summer League, hoping to see Zach play, but you also got to see Dakota play a few times. And he was balling at the end of that game. And then they just sat him. And I know they want to see their really good players, but there was like 2.5 minutes to go, and he was just like in fuego from outside. But back to Bherner now. I think just watching the tape, and we'll kind of talk about this later on too, but obviously, he's playing at a 2A school, playing against other 2A players, but a player with good size at 6'5", a player with a really nice, consistent shot who made threes at a really high clip at 44%, I think, during his senior season there at Brownstown Central. A guy that's fearless about when he takes his shot. He pulled up deep on some of them. He pulled up multiple times in just the film that I watched with a guy in his face. He had a few turnarounds like against 2 or 3 guys, and just seems absolutely fearless in that vein. I'd compare him to Ryan. This isn't my player comp, but I'd compare him to Ryan Klein in that standpoint of just like, if I feel like I can get my shot off, I feel like I can make it. So I think a player with good size. I think a player with a heck of an outside shot. Think he fits really nice into that 2-3 role. The 3 role really, where he's coming off some screens and pin downs and that type of stuff to get open looks, like we've seen Sasha do, or other guys in that similar role.
Yeah, I mean, he's the next shooter in that role. Mathias, Klein, Sasha, and all of them obviously are a little bit unique in their own ways, but he's going to be that next guy kind of in that role. Even could maybe throw Lawyer in that, even though he's a little bit more on ball dominant, maybe. But like you said, elite shooter. He didn't really care who was in front of him, where he was. Like, he was just going to shoot the ball, and he's going to shoot it well. 44% from 3. He shot well during AAU as well. Even when he was going up against a little bit better competition, like the shots there, he can make a ton of threes. There's a reason why Painter got him, right? He was he ends number 301, but he was unranked for however long until he gets the Painter bump. And there's a reason Painter went after him. It feels like we could almost just stop the show here. Obviously we are not, but it's just like that's what he is. Like, he's going to develop, and at some point he's probably going to shoot like 41% from 3 during a season and play a big role in that way. And that's just seems how Painter just does it with these guys.
Yeah, and I think similar to a few of those players that we said, just looking at him from an athletic standpoint, more defensively than offensively. I think similar to some of those guys that we mentioned, he maybe might take him a little bit of time to adjust defensively against Big Ten players, especially guys who've been in the league for 2 or 3 years and been in the weight program and been playing against that caliber of player. But I do think athletically, he's probably more athletic than a few of those guys. He rises up and throws down pretty easy. I mean, he shattered a backboard. Did Sasha ever shatter a backboard in high school? I'm not sure. So I think he's got a little bit more just ease in the way that he goes up to dunk, a little bit, I guess, more just I don't know what exactly I'm trying to say here, Joe. Just the fluidity in which he does it, I think, is at a little bit different level than a few of those other players that we mentioned.
He's a little bit more dynamic. Is kind of how I phrased it. Is like, yeah,
that's why didn't you should have cut me off and just said
I was, you sometimes you just got to let people rock, and then, you're ISOing and you see that there's a tough defense, but sometimes you just got to let them cook and see what happens. But a little bit more dynamic, I think, is kind of it. Like, shooting's going to be option one, and he's going to be guy runs off these pin downs and things like that. That's just what's going to happen. But even when you like look back at like Sasha, like by the time Sasha was a senior, like Sasha was coming off like the Chicago actions, which is like the pin down into a handoff. You saw a lot of them for like Lawyer this year. Bherner, I think, as a freshman was probably a lot more comfortable with that than Sasha. Now by the end, I thought Sasha was really, really good in those actions where he could just come off and he does that one dribble where he just like basically it's basically a sidestep just to get away from the defense, pull up from three. He could do that. And I think that's where some of the intrigue comes, is a little bit more athletic, a little bit able to be like, hey, he can like really do stuff with the ball in his hands at times, on top of being an elite shooter. So that does bring us kind of to year one, though. And this is where, I mean, we've already talked about a couple guys in this series and just like the whole Purdue offseason in general. It's a pretty loaded kind of guard wing room in terms of how many guys realistically can play. What do you see year one impact this year impact being for Jack Bherner?
Yeah, and first you said something about that little sidestep, and I thought that was one thing I really noticed. He has a really nice little head fake package. Like he'll head fake and then just go straight up. He'll head fake, he'll sidestep, and he does every once in a while have a little like step back crossover that he does just to create some space for him. So he's got some ways to get open from outside. But he's going to have to rely more on more than just his 6'5" frame to just rise up and pull up over people like he did in high school, against 2A competition, I guess, primarily. Now, he did go up against some schools like Columbus East and whatnot and also torch them. So that should be a good sign that maybe he's going to be able to do it eventually against bigger talent too. But year one, that's a tough question for me. I hate that you put me on the spot with this one.
I can go first. I'll go first. Because I think he's going to redshirt, like, and it's not like a knock on him as much as like where do the minutes come from? And if the minutes aren't there, giving him a year to develop physically, continue the athleticism and all that, like you saw it with Sasha. So I mean, and Sasha's on staff, like he could probably go talk with Sasha and he'll have the best opinion possible of like, hey, is this something that's worth it? Now, if he is playing, I think it's a good thing because he's probably just shooting the ball so well, and there's a little bit more pop to his game that Painter's like, hey, we just have to play him. But I do think he redshirts his freshman year, and I don't think like I said, it's not a negative redshirting. It's like it's probably the smart thing to do, if that makes sense.
No, I'm with you, and I think. When Catchings was still committed to Purdue, most people thought two people would redshirt.
Yeah.
And now that he's not there and they didn't obviously go out and pursue anybody else, I still think somebody is going to redshirt out of this class just because, like you said, there's only so many minutes to get around. We know what Jakari is against high-level talent. Everybody's heard the buzz on CJ Cox. I saw it in practice, got to see that live. I wish I would have gotten to see Bherner. He was out sick the day that I went because I think you can, like, even in those little, like Purdue against Purdue or an exhibition game, you can usually tell pretty quick, like, all right, are they going to fit this year or not? Like, are they ready or not? So I wish I would have got to see him play live, but I'm with you. I think somebody's going to redshirt, and with the amount of minutes to go around and how everything's going to be in terms of just the competition for different spots out there. And I think Bherner's probably the most likely to do so just because of that change in level of competition. We saw that with Miles at the beginning of last year. Another kid who went to a small school who was extremely dominant at that small school, who didn't have the biggest AAU experience maybe. And it took him a while to get adjusted to that. So I would expect similar things from him. So I'm with you. I think that's probably best for him, unless, like you say, he just comes in and blows everybody's mind.
Yeah, and if that happens, like I guarantee, because Painter has said it, like Painter has not decided that right now Jack Bherner is redshirting. Like That's not been made. But I mean, yeah, we go through the guys that realistically Bherner's a 3, maybe could play some 2. Like that's Lawyer, it's Jakari, it's CJ Cox, it's Miles Colvin, it's Camden Heidi. It's even maybe like if there's a Brian Waddell resurgence kind of senior year type thing. Like I would think it's more likely right now Waddell gets a shot instead of Bherner. And so that's just why I think redshirting. But let's say he does redshirt. Let's say he redshirts. What are kind of your thoughts then? How he could impact? I know it's a little bit more difficult. Or let's just say he doesn't redshirt. It'll make it easier. Let's say he doesn't redshirt and he can find a role on this team in some capacity. What do you kind of see that being?
I mean, if he doesn't redshirt, or even next year, right? Because I mean, this team's still going to be pretty loaded next year. Because who do we lose this year?
First,
Caleb.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's it.
It's not
senior. My bad on that. I said senior.
It's not like there's a lot that we're going to be losing between this year and next year, and not really in roles that he's going to be playing. So either year, I'm going to look at next year. Let's assume that he redshirts. He goes through a year practicing against Big Ten players. He gets in the weight room, all those sort of things. I think he can come in pretty quick and be that, Ryan Klein-like production first year. Come in and have a few games where he nails, 3 or 4 threes in a game, but over the course of a year, probably still, maybe average 6 points per game, something like that as a freshman, just because Cam Heidi's still going to be there. Miles Colvin's still going to be there. Jakari's still going to be there. Like
Fletch is going to be there.
Fletch is going to be there. So like it's still going to be hard to crack in. And it's really hard to look in your crystal ball, especially in the era of the transfers and everything else. But
yeah,
I think he could certainly come in and be Ryan Klein-esque freshman season. I was going to say Dakota, and then I looked at Dakota's numbers his freshman year. I totally forgot Dakota started half this season, and his numbers were way better than what I thought they were for a freshman.
In terms of pure just like kind of role and output, I think it could be like something like Colvin, right? Like, because if you look at Colvin, 13 to 26 from 2, he was 24-58 from 3. It wasn't like, I know we have the thought of Colvin being the super athletic, dynamic guy, which he very well can be one day. That wasn't his role last year. It was definitely more of spot up, come off handoffs, get to a pull-up jumper, stuff like that. And I think that would be the way or what I kind of see with Bherner, where you mentioned it earlier. It takes a little bit of time maybe to get adjusted and get fully acquainted at the D1 level. And then from there, probably in and out for minutes in terms of consistency. But like there's spots where you look and you're like, oh, like they're like, that dude, that's a good player right there. That's kind of what I would see from year one. Whether it be this year or next year, just because assuming everybody returns and all that, it still is going to be a lot. I guess we can kind of move on to career trajectory, things we kind of want to see from him and stuff like that. We've started these out with player comps. I'm assuming both of us have said I don't know whose yours is exactly, but I'm assuming we've said the player's name at some point in this show already. So who is yours for him?
I originally was going to go Dakota Mathias with a little bit more size. Because Dakota didn't come in as a great defender. I don't know if he's got the same handle that Dakota has, though. Because Dakota could really handle the ball for a guy that was 6'4", who kind of fills that role for Purdue, typically the role that we've been talking about. So I'm still going to go with Sasha, but a little bit more athletic. And I think, because we weren't doing player previews when Sasha Stefanovic came into play for Purdue, but I think just year one, at least from what I saw from Sasha on the court, I think maybe he's got a little bit more of a handle to him also. So personally, that's where I put it at. And I think he can have a Sasha type career. But I think, if everything goes right, he could, I would say Dakota Mathias had the better 4-year career than Sasha or even Ryan Klein. And I think he could have a Dakota Mathias type career if everything breaks right and he figures out how to fit in defensively.
Yeah, I mean, the Sasha is the comp. It really is. I think Bherner's a little bit more athletic, a little bit more dynamic, especially at least coming in. But like if Bherner has a Sasha career, that is a very good outcome for both him and
yes,
Purdue. Yeah, that's a very, very good outcome for both of them. A really productive. I mean, Sasha started 2 years his last 2 years, I think. Maybe some of his sophomore year, something like that. No, Sasha started his sophomore year. He started his last 3 seasons. So yeah, that's. I mean, I want to mix in a little bit of lawyer in terms of just a little bit more of like, hey, you can actually kind of get downhill. I know lawyer struggled finishing at the rim last year, but like, there's a little bit more pop to him in that sense. But Sasha's the comp. And like we said, he has more upside than just being a shooter. We kind of talked about it before the show, and I've mentioned it before on like my thread and stuff. But like, I think one of our concerns with this thought of Bherner being a guy that can be more than just a shooter is he did do it at the high school level. The guys he did it against, though, or he was much bigger than, he was more athletic than, which isn't uncommon for a high schooler to do. But for me, when I watched when he was driving, when he was getting downhill, other than some fakes and stuff, there was no real counter other than I'm bigger than you. And I don't know how well that translates to the Big Ten level right away, where instead of a 6-foot dude that he's going up against, it's a 6'6", I don't know, Ty Rodgers or something like that. Ty Rodgers probably wouldn't guard him, but you get what I'm saying. Of like just this bigger body, can that actually work then? Like, that's going to be the biggest thing. Like, I trust the shooting. It's going to translate, whether it takes a year or two. It's going to eventually get there. It's can he be more than that, and how long does that take to transfer? In addition, like I said, I think defensively, you kind of mentioned it. It's going to take probably a little bit of time for him to really develop on that end. But I think the one positive I noticed is he has good hands. Like, he has good, quick hands from what I saw. Creates some deflections, and so like, even if he is going to be a little bit slower at first, at least on the defensive end, like having quick hands can make up for it a bit. So that's going to be big. The other thing I wanted to point out with him is I like the facilitating. I think there's I think he reads the floor well. And if we think back to the Sasha comp, like Sasha could pass the ball. Sasha was never like a point guard, but Sasha had over a 16% assist rate his final 2 seasons at Purdue. You look at like what did that compare to last year? Mason Gillis, Morton had like a 16%, Edie had a 15, Fletch and Lance each had like 12% assist rate. Like, Sasha had a pretty good assist rate for his position. And I think Bherner has that. I think he reads the floor well. I think he has a pretty good pacing to his game. So I like that part to him too. I know I just kind of rambled, but
that's all right.
Anything I'm you kind of want to, go for it.
I'm with you on the defensive end, and just watching through that film, I saw quite a few blocks from a defensive standpoint. The only thing that concerned me a little bit are a lot of those blocks were coming from behind. Because maybe he got beat and then he was chasing him down and he used his length and his size to go ahead and get that block. And I think you mentioned it in your thread, just against Big Ten athletes, getting to the point where he's got the agility and speed and strength to stay in front of his guy. Maybe he just didn't have to. And maybe that's why it didn't happen as much, or I guess it jumped out that we saw that a little bit. But I think that's going to be a little bit of adjustment still. But from the same thing you said, and I think a big part of that is, and not to stereotype, but he's a coach's kid.
He is,
right? Like, Painter loves that. When guys come in and they know their role, they're super fundamental. They just know basketball basics and they've been taught fundamentals. And we've heard him mention before in arguments at times when Sasha was struggling or when Fletch has been struggling, where he said, but he knows where the ball's supposed to go. He knows where he's supposed to be. And sometimes that's worth more than necessarily another 3 or 4 points a game. Just being in the right spot, making sure the team's running the play right, making sure everybody's moving right. They're in the right position all the time. So that's something else, that you factor in whenever he does get on the court. If he has kind of that basketball coach's kid mentality and those basic fundamentals, knows Purdue basketball, that's going to help him stay on the floor also.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, coach's kid, the one of the AAU games I caught live of him, it was actually Braden was already in college, so it wasn't Braden playing, but it was Bherner against Braden's dad, who was coaching their team, or the opposing team, which was fun just to see from what they're able to do, or X's and O's, stuff like that. It was fun to watch. But I think we've kind of gone through everything I at least have with Bherner. Do you have anything else? There's a question in here we can get to also, or a couple questions we can get to as well if you want to get to that.
You didn't give me a chance to respond, Jim.
I thought it looked like you gave me a look like, no, I'm good.
Now let's go. Let's go. Let's answer the question.
No, what were you going to say?
No, I'm going to save it for the end now.
Okay. Jeff Parks, Bherner shattered a backboard as a junior in high school. If he hits the weight room and bulks up, can he become a Kramer type defender? I'm going to throw that one more to you because I haven't watched much of Chris Kramer, but
dude, Kramer was a dog. Like if you ask Purdue fans who was their favorite defensive player in the last 2 decades who watched the team all the way through that time, you're going to get Chris Kramer from a lot of people. So I don't know. Can he become a good defender? I think so. But to put him in or a really good Big Ten defender, like I obviously think that's a possibility, but I don't know that I'm throwing anybody out there in Kramer's comp defensively until I see a handful of games.
Yeah, I don't got much to say on that. I know Kramer was a really good defender. I wouldn't expect Bherner to become that. If he does, then that's going to be tough for the rest of the Big Ten. Midwest Toker, Brownstown, and IU didn't give him a look. Not me said Painter offered first, and I believe that was like he was getting Bherner was starting to get some other high major looks. Purdue offered, I believe he visited and then just like committed right away. And he committed very, very early. So maybe IU would have eventually got to it. I'm not sure though.
Yeah, at the time he committed, and he was ranked in like the low 300s, right? So
yeah,
he wasn't getting a lot of high major offers early. The time he committed, he had offers from Indiana State, Bellarmine,
yeah,
and Liberty at that point in time. But he was getting looks later, like Virginia was looking at him, some places like that. So I don't know anything about whether IU looked at him or not. I don't think that's really. From the outside looking in, not to speak to the IU program, we could ask Mr. Delphi Bracketology, Tonsoni, that sometime. But that hasn't really seemed to be the Woodson model to take guys that are in the 200 to 300s and find diamonds in the rough and try to coach them up. It's been more the transfer portal and really high star recruits, it feels like.
Yeah. So what did you have to say when I cut you off earlier?
Well, you popped a surprise question on me with the schedule, so okay. I was gonna return the favor, and we're gonna go into. I know later we're gonna go into this when we kind of go through position groups and talk about potential minutes. But I don't know if you saw our friends from up north put out a graphic today.
They are okay. Yes.
Yeah, where they said they tried to guess the expected scoring of the team. I'm not going to ask you what you think everybody's going to score, but they had Braden Smith at 17 points. Oh, this is Sleepers Media put this out, by the way. Yes. Greg Waddell and Carter Elliott. Braden Smith, 17.1 per game. TKR, 13.8 per game. Fletcher Lawyer, 12.1 per game. Cam Heide, 11.8 points per game. Miles Colvin, 9.2 points per game. Jacobson, 6.1. Jakari, 3.9. CJ 3.1, Caleb First 3.1, and Will Berg 2.6. All I'm going to ask, is there anything on there that jumped out to you that you were like, nah, I don't agree with that. This guy should be more, this guy should be less?
I'm going to quickly pull up the graphic because I'm not the best at comprehending audio like that. Let's see. I mean, the first thing that stands out is I hope Braden averages 17.1 points per game. Like, please. I like the Heidi shot at 11.8. There's a scenario where Heidi and Colvin are both right there, I guess. Jakari feels a little low to me. I just think he's going to get minutes, and by a little low, I think he'll be like the 6-7. But if I'm being realistic, I would almost just, and I hope it doesn't happen in terms of Braden, but like I would almost flop Braden in TKR. Just like I think it's more likely Braden averages like 13 and 9 assists than maybe like 17 and 6 or 7 assists. That'd probably be the one thing and I hope I'm wrong, but that'd probably be the one thing that I look at and just like I would imagine TKR probably averaging more than Braden, assuming he's getting the workload that we think.
Right. And what did Braden average last year? Because I thought that spot at 17.1, just for the fact that he wants to facilitate first as much as he can, I still see that 17.1 being a little bit high. And I had a few of in my head, I might have had 2 or 3 of the other guys just a tick higher than they did to make up maybe 3 points per game. Because if you're averaging 17.1 a game, you're figuring you got a handful of games in the 25s and a handful of games that don't go well down in the 12s, something like that. Well, what did he average last year, Joe?
Braden averaged 12 points and 7.5 assists and 6 rebounds.
Yeah.
Jesus. Braden's really good.
It's a 5-point jump, though.
Yeah, with Zach Edey gone. I actually hate it less. For whatever reason in my head, I was stuck on like Braden averaging like 10. I think I'm gonna change it to like 15 points then. Man, Braden's so good. He averaged 7.5 assists. Why did that not get talked about more?
I feel like it did, Joe. I feel like we did talk about it.
I know. Maybe. I put out a tweet, and it's Braden. Like right now, Braden Smith is exactly so he's halfway through his college career. He's exactly halfway to being tied for first in all-time assists in the Big Ten. I would have like Braden's gonna be the all-time Big Ten assist leader when it's all said and done.
Yeah,
probably.
I think the Wilberg's a little low. I think they can run small ball. They've talked about that with TKR at the 5 and then First or Burgess at the 4 potentially. But I feel like Painter's still going to want a traditional 5 out there for 25 minutes a game maybe. And if that gets split between Jacobson and him a little bit, I feel like just from rebounds and putbacks, he's going to average more than 2.6 points per game. Because I think he's going to give Berg a shot. Yeah,
that's fair. And I'm saying one of Harris or Koch averages more than what they're listed. I don't I would lean Harris, but if it's Koch that's at like 7, it wouldn't shock me either. But yeah, I think it's solid overall. It makes
I do too. I thought they did a nice job all in all. So shout out Carter and Greg.
So that's a tough thing to do too. Predicting points per game,
for sure. Now, we won't talk about the fact that Carter had TKR 4th in scoring on his list before they talked and came to their conclusions together. But
interesting.
But shout out Carter and Greg. Good list. No large disagreements from Joe and I over here.
Yep. So did you have anything else then?
I did not. We will soon be talking about Jakari and or Burgess. Coming up.
One of them next week, probably one of them the following week. We'll probably discuss right after this which one we're going to do. But we do appreciate everybody tuning in. Like we said, I think we're pretty consensus on Bherner, and I think it's pretty common throughout Purdue fans of this guy has a lot of upside as a shooter, but being a little bit more than a shooter may just take a little bit of time to realize that. If you guys are still listening, please like and subscribe on YouTube. Boilers, or it's under Brags in the Stands, but just hitting the like button, it helps us a lot. Commenting stuff throughout, during the live show or even after, that also helps us a lot. So we do appreciate all support in that sense. You can follow us on Twitter at Boilers in Stands. You can follow Kraig on Twitter at CraigBowers34 and me on Twitter at JoeJacksonCVB. We will be back next week talking about one of the 2 remaining Purdue freshmen that we've not talked about yet, and we will see you then.